Hi everyone, and thank you for allowing me to talk to you today. Right, first I'd like to introduce ourselves. Now I know that some of you may be carers or you know someone who is, so let me just say that I can only speak from our experience regarding Emily's particular condition and needs over 37 years and how we approach it. By so doing, perhaps other carers can relate and even benefit from what I have to say. But ultimately, different carers will have a different approach depending on the needs of the person being cared for. What is a carer? A carer is anyone, including children and adults, who look after a family member, partner or friend who needs help because of their illness, frailty, disability, a mental health problem or an addiction, and cannot cope without their support. The care they give is unpaid. The life of a full-time unpaid carer means a complete change of lifestyle, putting someone else first, requiring devotion and dedication, a need for compassion, empathy and love, supporting them physically and emotionally, making sacrifices, fighting on their behalf, and working in on-call 24/7, 365. If the role of a parent carer required a job description, it might look something like this. In 1987, our third child, Emily, was born 3 months prematurely due to Liz suffering a serious hemorrhage. Emily's premature birth resulted in hydrocephalus and quadriplegic cerebral palsy. She would never walk, talk or feed herself, and within her first 2 years she also suffered loss of sight. She would be dependent on others for everything for the rest of her life. That day, 37.5 years ago, Liz and I became carers for the rest of Emily's life. When Emily was born, I was told that she wouldn't survive for more than a few hours, days at the most. Often, following operations, we were told there was no more doctors could do, and it's up to Emily now. Then, when she left hospital, we were told to just go home, feed her, take care of her personal needs, and make her comfortable. But Liz and I had different ideas. Like giving her the will to live. Take professional advice by all means, but follow your own inclinations too. Do you really think Emily would be enjoying herself like this if we just made her comfortable? Remember, professionals built the Titanic, amateurs built the Ark. When someone is unable to do anything for themselves, and when they can't even communicate their needs and wishes, it would be easy for them to give up. So Liz and I are constantly engaging with Emily. The more I talk to her, the more she responds with giggles, laughs, and her own versions of words. But it doesn't matter. It's the mutual interaction that matters. For example, she loves stories, and I literally act the characters to bring them to life, and she loves it. I also encourage her to turn the pages, and though it takes time and effort by her, the sense of achievement is worth it. The plot or storyline doesn't matter either. It's the interaction that she loves. In fact, I've even read a newspaper and made her laugh. Come to think of it, these days the news makes me laugh and cry too. In short, Liz and I are constantly giving Emily the will to live. When we first brought Emily home from hospital, we felt lost and vulnerable. Suddenly, with no doctors and nurses around, we had to immediately become experts and learn about her medication, her handling, her bathing, sleeping, feeding, and so on, all of which demand extra care and attention. As the weeks and months passed, Liz and I learned how to share the duties, and to this day, Liz does the personal care, bathing and dressing, and I do the feeding and medication. And as Emily is tube-fed, all these things must be done in a careful and timely manner throughout the day and the night, at home and away. When people ask me about Emily and what she can or can't do, I tell them that when we go into her room in the morning, she's in exactly the same position that she was when we put her to bed. She can't move herself, although she can fall from side to side, so we have to bolster with pillows. She can't turn onto her side or her tummy, and we must leave her arms outside of the blankets to prevent her from sliding down the bed. She can't snuggle up to keep warm either. Imagine what that's like. I don't know about you, but during the night I'm constantly moving to make myself comfortable in bed and to keep warm. She can't scratch an itch or wipe her nose. She can't physically support herself in any way. When I lift her, although she's a lightweight, she's also a deadweight, as she can't put her arms around my neck to help in any way. But probably the hardest and most frustrating thing for her and for us is her inability to communicate. During her 37 years, diagnosing her illnesses has been more like a process of elimination, not just for Liz and me, but for doctors too. When a patient is clearly ill and in pain, but cannot tell you what or where it is, it can become life-threatening, as in Emily's case. Sadly, due to a misdiagnosis at 2 years old, Emily sustained further brain damage, which resulted in further disability and loss of sight. When you decide to become a full-time carer, you must be prepared for a complete change of life. Everything must revolve around the person you're caring for. Your own life, plans and aspirations come second, and sometimes not at all. Claire was 13 and Dale 9 when Emily was born, and they had to change their lives too. In the evenings, the three of us would visit Liz and Emily at UHW, with Claire often doing her homework at Emily's bedside. With Liz and Emily at the hospital and me at work, they very much had to deal with their own lives, yet hardly missed a day at school. People tend to forget the siblings who make so many sacrifices too. Life becomes a strict routine. Feeding and medication must be given in a timely manner at regular times of the day, as well as personal care and physiotherapy and so on. Home and away. Is it? Right, okay, Emily. Sleepless nights are the order of the day. An audio-visual monitor filling our bedroom with light and sound is not conducive to a good night's sleep, but it is essential to Emily's care. Emily's early life was touch and go, undergoing 22 operations in almost as many years. The consequence of this is that she hardly slept at all. I will remember being advised to play subliminal tapes to help her sleep. Eager to see if they worked, I sat beside Emily's bed and played the tape. And it worked. Soon I was fast asleep, Emily still wide awake beside me. You've got to laugh. Over the years, Liz has had operations for cancer and more recently major open heart surgery, adding to the ongoing care and responsibility we owe to Emily. Again, I had to fight to get the extra personal care for Emily when Liz was in hospital and during her recovery. Currently, we get help with a team of 3 carers working alternately 8 until 4 and an hour on Sunday morning to do Emily's personal care. Liz and I care for Emily for the remaining 120 hours a week. While the caregivers allow us to have some time to ourselves, we're always on call. Sometimes Liz and I have had to leave the restaurant halfway through our meal to sort something out. For example, recently we got a call from the caregiver saying the overhead hoist was broke and Emily was stuck in mid-air. Of course, because paid carers are subject to health and safety, they were not allowed to lift her down. Also, Emily has a feeding tube called a Mickey, which sometimes has to be changed, but the caregivers are not qualified to change it, only a peg nurse, or Liz. Also, Emily is presently dependent on suppositories to kill the pain, but the caregivers are not allowed to administer them. Therefore, Liz must be available to administer them 3 times a day. And the examples go on. The point is, it doesn't seem to matter whether Liz and I are qualified, because as Emily's parents, we are not only allowed to do these things, but often compelled to. Sadly, we're increasingly seeing the provision of help and support dwindling. Unfortunately, hardly a week goes by without someone failing to turn up, and so, regardless of any plans we may have made, it's down to us again. Now, Liz and I have always been old school and independent in our belief that our daughter is entirely our responsibility, and the love we have for her will always be greater than the time and energy we must put into caring for her. But as we get older, we realize more and more that Emily's well-being depends entirely on our well-being, and if we should fall to sickness, that special parental care could be lost. When we interview new applicants for Emily's care, the main question we ask is, what made you apply for the post? The answer we're looking for is something like, I wanted to give something back, or I wanted to help someone less fortunate, etc. But the answers we're getting are, or because the hours suit, or it fits with my family life. In truth, of course, a carer's job is not like a shop or an office where taking the odd day off is okay or leaving early for the kids' sports day is not an issue. A care worker's job is not a simple 9 to 5 depends on how I feel kind of job. A care worker's job, by its very nature, must be a way of life, because her life depends on it. At present, the rate of pay for a care worker is scandalously low and doesn't always attract the serious carer. In our case, we're fortunate to have 3 special ladies alternately looking after Emily, because they do it for love, not money. But they are the exception rather than the rule, and only when care workers are truly valued by the government for the highly responsible work that they do and paid accordingly will quality people be attracted to the service. Then it could be a case of agencies picking the best instead of just taking what they can get. When Emily was born and we were first told about her condition, that she would never walk, talk or feed herself, and that she would be dependent on others for the rest of her life, I really thought it was the end of our hopes for a good life and the end of our freedom. It wasn't what I wanted. I also saw her disability and suffering as cruel and unfair, and for the first time my faith in God was dented, but not for long. Gradually, Emily took over our lives and gave our lives meaning. Emily's needs and very dependence on us was in fact a gift. All ambitions for success, lifestyle and material things were gone. For the first time, I could clearly see the reason we're here, and it's not for the things I just mentioned. My former worries and problems paled into insignificance compared to what she and we were now facing. But I also knew that caring for Emily was my calling and life purpose. I had been given the best gift I could have wished for, the chance to fill my life and hers with love, compassion and care. My former life and ambitions could never have given me that. 37 years later, I feel truly blessed, and although life is not easy, every task and challenge that Liz and I face in caring for Emily brings its own rewards that can be summed up in one word: love. See, the wonderful thing about being a parent carer is that you know what it's like to live two lives. Before Emily, like most people, our lives were a mixture of both work and leisure, but with the luxury of choice. Also, like most people, we had ups and downs, with many of the downs seen as problems and worries. Also, just like most people, sometimes we complained about our lot. Then Emily came along. Now we didn't have to think about where we were going for our holidays, or which restaurant we should visit tonight, or which show we should book, because such events were rarely possible. Now our thoughts were focused on how we could support her, what facilities, services and treatment we could access to help her, and, as little was available, how we could fight and even create such services and facilities ourselves, which we did. Now you realize what life is really about, and you recognize and welcome your true life purpose. But most of all, you welcome your ability to love, unconditionally and fully, until your heart bursts. And far from seeing the second life as a problem, you see it as a challenge. And far from seeing it as a burden, you see it as a gift. And far from seeing it as self-pity, you see it as self-growth. And it changes you for the better, forever. This is the life you were born to live. In the interests of hard-working, unpaid, and often undervalued carers, it would be remiss of me not to include the following. In conclusion, as I said at the beginning, the carer experiences I mentioned here are purely from the perspective of Liz, me and my family. While different families may have differing experiences, generally the role of the carer in Wales is vital to the health and well-being of the person being cared for, and saves the Welsh Government £10.6 billion a year. That said, Liz and me will always feel ultimately responsible, because Emily is our precious daughter, and that's what loving parent carers are for. And now, to end on a more light-hearted note,